Welcome to our Tiger Success Series webcast today. We share leadership training that builds trust, interdependence, genuineness, empathy, risk, and success in the workplace. Here's our host, Diane Crampton.
Welcome. It's good to see you here today. So how are you? Give me a thumbs up or say hi in chat. Oh, so good to see you. Welcome, everyone. Today, I'm discussing accountable decision-making and what frustrates applying Dissent in decision-making in the teams that you lead. Now, imagine holding a decision-making session with your team and you ask for input, and all you hear is crickets. If you have ever experienced this as a team member or leader, give me a thumbs up. It's common, isn't it? And thanks for sharing. It can be so frustrating. So what do you, as a manager facilitator, need to be aware about in team dynamics and personal agendas to ensure your decision-making team produces highly productive outcomes that can be taken into planning with high accountability and execution? Leaders in any organization show their tenacity in many ways through mentoring, setting strategy, and furthering the work culture that you have today. What if you want to change it? One of the most important ways to test a leader is in their understanding of how to apply dissent in decision-making and whether they can effectively facilitate decision-making that includes dissent. Without it, you can end up with groupthink and risky shift. Those two group decision-making problems I talked about in the accountable decision-making webinar. You and I both know that there are so many leadership books on strategy, assessment, and evaluation. But many top executives approach decision-making in a way that leaves out options for dissent or proper evaluation. Put simply, many leaders get decision-making wrong. And I see this all the time. Some managers and business owners regard complex decision-making as a one-time decision. In their minds, it's a choice made at a point in time after reviewing the options in black and white or after coming out of a meeting. For example, say your organization is thinking of downsizing because of the economy or weak sales. Your leader's course of action will, of course, include analyzing spreadsheets, reading reports, considering them, and then sending a yes or no to the rest of the organization with the order to follow through on the decision. This is a traditional way of making decisions in command and control work cultures that impacts teams, systems, families, the greater community, customers, stakeholders, vendors, and ultimately organizational reputation. And it isn't wrong. That's how command and control works. It could, however, be better. You don't want to overlook social and organizational context, which ultimately determines success that is free from unfortunate ramifications, of which is being able to attract talent you need when you need it. High performance decision making, on the other hand, is a process that takes weeks to roll out into execution. It took the defense contractor that had to downsize in the case study I shared with you in the accountability decision-making webinar months to make decisions on how to roll out the downsize. So national security and retaliation were not ramifications. High performance decision making that lays out groundwork for change is often complicated by politics, power plays, and personalities. It's loaded with debate and discussion and requires accountability and support across all levels of operation upon execution. So let me repeat that. High performance decision making that lays the groundwork for change is loaded with debate and discussion and requires accountability and support across all levels of operation upon execution. So if you missed the webinar on accountable decision making and are just joining us now, you can find the playback link in the Tiger 6 Principles Learning Center at learn.corevalues.com and temporarily on our business page on LinkedIn. While the end goal is the same between command and control work culture and that of high performance employee empowered organizations, not all decision-making processes are equally effective when it comes to identifying and considering the best option out of a wide range of ideas. In the webinar, I mentioned how important developing group norms and ground rules are for keeping decision teams collaborative, civil, productive, and moving forward. And I provide a checklist and examples of group norms as a downloadable in the Tiger 6 Principles Learning Center, so you might want to check it out. And we have a Tiger 6 Principles facilitation tool we teach managers and consultants to use that speeds up this group norm and ground rule co-creative process. So let's focus now on politics, power plays, and personalities. In a recent article in the Harvard Business Review entitled "What You Don't Know About Making Decisions," David Garvin and Michael Roberto introduced two broad approaches to decision making that have evolved from research. They are inquiry and advocacy. Inquiry is a very open process designed to generate multiple ideas that could contain dissent, promote the exchange of ideas, and produce a well-reasoned and well-thought-through solution. It's the inquiry process that Tiger 6 Principles advocates for and teaches to. Unfortunately, this approach isn't a habit many top-down and control leaders are required to have. And it isn't an approach used by many managers who copy the behaviors of leaders they have observed in their past and present jobs, and that they copy because they haven't been trained. When training is absent, people tend to imitate the actions and behaviors of the leaders in their organizations they view as successful. What happens instead is advocacy. The advocacy approach is one where members approach decision-making as a competition. For example, one department head might want to steer the decision in a way that produces more resources and a bigger budget for their department than other departments. With advocacy, they don't necessarily compete openly. Instead, they are members of well-defined groups with special interests and a stake in the decision. They hold on to their preferred solutions based on their own interests. And these interests might not provide the best solution. And this is part of the siloing problem. The result is that people stick to their own guns in the face of disagreement. And as a result, they lose objectivity. It limits the decision-making team's ability to look at opposing arguments because advocates select their own favorable data. They are known to resist and even withhold conflicting but relevant information. So, as a manager facilitator, you will want to develop some ground rules and behavior norms that your decision-making team members sign off on to deal with this. Sound familiar? Then let's apply this. Let's focus on a hypothetical situation involving Bob and Joe, who are plant managers. Both want to push their efficiency programs into the decision-making process. Both, however, are wary of giving full disclosure for fear that doing so will jeopardize their chance of winning their position. Team discussions become antagonistic because competition in the decision-making process often ends up that way, as a battle of wills, with the potential for under-the-table tactics. What is more desirable is inquiry, with facilitation that takes into consideration a variety of options. Yes, it is human nature to hold on to personal interests. However, managers who are skilled in high-performance team decision-making that applies dissent in productive ways use techniques that neutralize closely held positions and interests. This helps them and their teams to decide on the best course of action and not necessarily the action of one team member, unless it is proven to be the best course of action after careful fact-finding, system testing, discussion, and critical thinking. Rather than suppressing dissent, an inquiry approach sparks critical thinking. The caveat for an inquiry process is how rigorous questioning can get and how to manage group process and behaviors so that discussions are civil, objective, and produce understanding rather than advocacy. So let's take this a step further. Rigorous questioning and critical thinking inevitably lead to conflict, which is simply a different way of looking at something. Achieved correctly, dissent conflict brings issues into the spotlight. It results in choices that are not just based on politics or personalities. When handled poorly, the decision-making process can derail. So two types of conflict exist on teams. Substantive conflict relates to the work at hand. Affective conflict involves personal friction, rivalries, and clashing personalities. They are easy to distinguish. When a team holds a tough discussion based on facts, it's substantive conflict. But when comments turn into aggressive behavior and personal attack, then it's affective. In affective conflict, the room can be thick with friction, and the emotional consequences tend to be ones that linger even after the decision has been made. The reality is that affective conflict like this makes it harder for team members to work together when rolling out the plan. And that is why accountability in decision making can often derail. So can conflict, which is basically different options and opinions, be avoided on high performance teams? Basically, no. In fact, I highly suggest that conflict be encouraged. The key here is for managers as facilitators to focus on substantive conflict, the sharing of all relevant information, and discussing and validating different options while keeping effective conflict off the table. This ensures you and enables you to turn conflict, which is a different perspective and factual dissent, into sources of superior decision making. You accomplish this through co-created group norms and ground rules that your team has introduced and weighed in on. And feel free to contact me if you want to learn more. So to recap, apply dissent into decision-making teams by focusing on substantive conflict with different views and facts that are transparently shared. Focus on inquiry rather than advocacy. Develop group norms and ground rules that spell out what team members want to see happen, along with behaviors discussed and identified that damage trust, interdependence, genuineness, empathy, risk resolution, and success that will result in breakdown. If you have found this conversation to be helpful, please give a thumbs up in chat. Oh, I'm glad to see this. In our next short topic, we are focusing on how to incorporate accountable decision-making and group dynamics into sales team management. Our guest is Tiger's licensed consultant and podcast host, Ali Camilletti, founder and president of Spark Your Mindset. You won't want to miss it. To stay in the loop and to be in the know about these topics, you can subscribe to receive a heads up in the Learning Center at learn.corevalues.com or through our newsletter at corevalues.com. Thanks so much for your time and attention today. Our Tiger's 6 Principles mission is to improve the world of work for employees around the world, one great team at a time. Until next time, here's to your ongoing and continued success.
Thank you for attending our webcast today. At Tigers, we've helped conscious leaders build more cooperation among employees and collaboration between departments for over 25 years. Tell your friends about our topic today. They can join us regularly by subscribing to our newsletter on the web at corevalues.com.